And now, it's time for TJ Wow.
Hello everybody, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you are joining us from. My name is Jo Cook, I'm your host today, I'm the Deputy Editor of TJ, and it's my job to get you involved in these amazing conversations that we've got going on. Speaking of which, the late great Jay Cross, his quote here, "Conversation is the most powerful learning technology ever invented." That to me really sums up what these sessions are. Yes, it's a webinar, but it's so much more than a standard webinar. What we are focusing on here is the conversation. Other than a few opening slides from me, we don't have any presentations from people, and actually poor Stephanie and Doug, who are our speakers today, I've told them, no, you can't have a script. There's nothing planned. If it all goes wrong, it's my fault. But it's all about the conversation, and that's what you are here today for. And that's what the chat window is there for. If you have a thought, a comment, a question, whether you agree or disagree, please use that chat window. If you're thinking, oh, I know a really good YouTube video or a blog or something I wrote or a LinkedIn post, share the link in there. Just paste the link in. And I've done that just now. Let me just show you. Literally, you just copy and paste it in. It's nice and easy. So we'd love to know some of those things from you. At the very bottom of the screen, there is the question and answer box. This is absolutely great. I'm going to keep an eye on the chat, I promise. But if you want me to absolutely see a question for one of our speakers, make sure you pop it in there and I will pitch it to them for you. Join us on Twitter, #TJWow. Go and tweet your thoughts, and I'll share the Twitter handles of our speakers in just a moment. You can go to trainingjournal.com. All of our sessions are on there, recorded and available. We've got an amazing back catalogue to have a look at. Without further ado, I think it's probably time that we got to our speakers. So we've got two amazing speakers this week, all about this topic. We have Stephanie and Doug, and I think they've got some really good stuff to share. Let's get them on video and let's get the conversation started. So let me bring the video panel over. Here we go. And I think Doug's been sorting through lots of different shades of brown paint, I think is what Doug has been doing in the background. So let's hear from our speakers. We're going to hear from Stephanie first and then Doug. Just an introduction to say hello and who they are, and then we'll come back and ask them a little bit about our opening question. So Stephanie, first of all, welcome and thank you. And tell us just a little bit of who you are and what you do, please.
Sure. I'm a Berlin-based Canadian artist with an education in accounting of all things and information technology, and I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about that as we progress through the afternoon. I do creativity and innovation consulting now to help people and organizations realize their potential.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much, Stephanie. And Doug, let's come to you. Let's get you unmuted. And Doug, tell us a little bit about what it is that...
Oh, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for the invitation and the opportunity to say hi to so many of you and have hopefully what I think will be a good, fun and interesting conversation. My name's Doug Shaw. I'm a self-taught artist and a freelance organisational and learning and development consultant. I like to mix those two parts of my life in different measures depending on what the client and personal needs are.
I think that's really interesting you say that, and Laura was saying in the chat window, a balanced background from Stephanie, and it's about bringing both of those things together. So our opening question, we always have a starter for 10 on our sessions, is actually how can we use storytelling, humour, music and art in learning? Stephanie, let's come to you first. What are your first initial thoughts on this question?
I think learning at its best is really about being curious. What happens if? So I think, in the work that I do, I use all of those things you mentioned and then some to spark people's curiosity, to get them a little bit uncomfortable, get them out of their comfort zone, get them thinking about things different, and help to spark that curiosity. What happens if, and then get them to apply it to, more than just painting or more than just storytelling, broaden it out from that circle.
Love that. Curiosity is such an important point. I think curiosity for me is maybe second only to self-awareness in terms of being a learning and development professional and actually just being a really decent human being and interested in things.
I think you need to be curious to be self-aware. You need to be...
That's like chicken and egg, isn't it, that one? Okay, that's a really good point. So guys, curiosity, self-awareness, we started with that already. Get into that chat window and let us know your thoughts. Doug, tell us what it is that you're thinking with regards to this opening question about how you can use storytelling, humour, music and art in learning.
Okay, I think there are a number of places that you can start from. I think that an inherent level of curiosity, I would agree with Stephanie, is vitally important. And I think your point about self-awareness is important generally. I don't want to get into a row about which came first, but they're both, I think they're both useful. I mean, I'm starting to sort of scribble and map out a number of things on a sheet of paper here about, where this question could flow and where it could go. And I think that if we accept that curiosity is the spark and doing things differently is part of the aim, then I think we can apply the arts in a broad sense. I mean, I know we're looking at storytelling, art, humour, music now, but I think there's a space in the creative sphere for most things that people choose to do that takes them away from kind of where they are now and somewhere different. So I think to that extent, there are opportunities to use this stuff very much in a kind of team building stroke, getting to know each other better environment, and we can maybe come onto that later. I also think that the arts are a great opportunity for sense making and making sense of a complicated, uncertain world using different lenses. And another thing that's on my mind at the moment is a sort of connection between sort of a therapeutic sense that some of the arts can bring to us. I notice that when I work with people on more explicitly arts-based activity, lots of people will use that term. They find it therapeutic. So I think there's something about wellness and well-being potentially in there too.
Absolutely. There's a few different angles we can take on things there. And Caroline in the chat window has added, and for allowing people to make their own sense and meaning as well. So I think that's kind of interesting there. Stephanie, let's come to you for a moment, because we were chatting a while ago about a really interesting piece of work you're doing, bringing together the very hardcore data elements of your work, but also the artistic elements of your work. Could you tell us a little bit more about that, please?
I'm trying to remember which project we were talking about. Were we talking about the one with my scarf? Yeah, so I'm working with a group here in Berlin, a startup, and they asked me to help them visualize their financial data, because they like that I'm an accountant and I'm an artist, and they're like, oh, you can help us visualize the financial data. And it's been a long time since I worked in accounting. I'm not quite sure what to do, and I let it percolate, because I believe that reflection is important, and giving things space to think about things and just to let them percolate. I think that's important in our process, and I think a lot of organizations have taken that out of their organizations and their drive to be productive. So I was at a Christmas market, and I saw this scarf that I'm wearing, and I was attracted initially because of the colors, because they're the colors that I wear. And then I'm like, there's something else more to this. And I thought, oh, this is how I want to visualize the financial data for this client. And I had to buy the scarf so I can show the client, this is how we're going to visualize your financial data. And I think I would never have guessed that I would have come up with a solution to the problem at a Christmas market, but there you have it. And it's about, keeping an open mind and just looking around and taking things in and seeing what fits.
Absolutely brilliant. And having been to Christmas markets in Berlin, they're amazing and really great experiences. I've never quite come up with the solution that you have, Stephanie, but I can definitely see how that would happen. And it's bringing those two things together. And part of this conversation in the chat, Natalie says it allows people to express themselves in ways they find most comfortable too, and allows room for individual interpretation. And I think that's something that's quite important, and everybody's nodding away there. And Lise is saying translating theoretical data into visual images helps log information into people's brains. I love that, Lise. And I was actually doing something, the piece of work I was doing just before coming online today was taking something where I'm thinking, well, I need to get this concept across to people, and doing that in a visual manner. Unfortunately, not quite as visual and lovely as Stephanie, but just being able to take the concept and put it onto a PowerPoint slide with an arrow to show it's a bad thing. And even if we can interpret something in that way, really simple and basic, I think it's helping people. And Nikki says it's a good excuse to buy a new piece of clothing. I'm with that. Let's come to Doug and ask this question, Doug. So this is from Philippa in the question pod. So thank you very much, Philippa. She says, can you help with good hooks for a tale? Because I agree, stories and engaging curiosity can make things memorable. So what are your thoughts around a good hook for a story tale there, Doug?
Okay, well, good question. First things first, that'll teach me to think that I was going to follow on from where Stephanie was going, so I'll put all that to one side. I think, but I'll come back to there was something you said that sparked something very interesting in my head. It's an interesting question. I mean, I think the hook as such, I think it matters for me. I think a good story is personal. Tale, sorry, I can see. Yeah, good. I see. Sorry, it was tale with that you wag. Now it's tale as a story. Good stuff. Okay, so I think, yeah, I enjoy something that kind of comes from the heart. I think if I get into something. If I'm listening to someone telling a story and it feels like it matters to them, then I think that's really useful. That's not necessarily a hook as such, but I think it's a way in which you convey your message with a degree of realness, I suppose. So I think, yeah, I'm struggling with this one, to be brutally honest, but I think a degree of sincerity matters for me anyway, and I think. I mean, you took one of the subjects in the strap, as it were, at the beginning was about humour. And I think humour is a really useful tool in storytelling. And for me, I find it works particularly well when applied in a kind of self-deprecating way. So I don't think it works very well if you come on and use it as a tool to beat your audience up with. Although some comedians use that to very great effect. But I find that actually, if you're willing to put yourself potentially in a kind of vulnerable position, then I think that's quite a compelling thing. And you can sometimes use humour to do that. So I wouldn't say storytelling is my area of expertise, although my side project all around free art in the community has kind of become a story, which I now continue to play with and shape and tell. But I think some realness, a little bit of vulnerability and a little bit of self-deprecating humour go a long way.
I really like that. Totally on board with the self-deprecating humour, especially. And Nicola makes a really good point in the chat. Nikki says, it's a difficult question. Context and audience will play a big part in what makes it memorable. Martin in the chat says, stories, it's worth reflecting on what works for you, what are the ingredients, the emotional connection and the response is important. Caroline's agreeing with that. And I like what Lisa said, a good hook can be a personal story which introduces some kind of context. And this is something that I try and get people to do a lot from a training point of view, is use that as an example. You might have your piece of theory or data or information or a point you need to get across, but then saying, well, this is how I did it, or how I did it wrong, or this is what happens when you go in to do whatever the reality is, I think can make a really good point. And Nicola's adding, when she teaches presentation skills, she talks through ethos, pathos, and logos, roughly it's credibility and emotion, logic and structure. So that hopefully is really helpful. Stephanie, any
The
thoughts
only
on
other
this
thing I would
storytelling
add,
part before we go
and I
back to
agree
what kind of
wholeheartedly with
sparked
the
something for
vulnerability
Doug?
aspect of it. I think that's a really important part to be authentic and to share, why something is important. But I look at some of the, the other side of that, or the, other side of that is there's some storytelling games and things that I play that really have nothing to do with that, and when they're just games to make up stories, and they're improv games and things like that that are meant just to get people out of their comfort zones and thinking differently and things. So in that case, it's throw a word out and let's start from there and see where this goes. One of the games I have uses tiles, and it's the same thing. Let's pick a tile and start from there. And it's just about, let's see how crazy we can make this and how long can we keep the story going, with everybody adding a little bit in. So, that's a different kind of story. So.
Yeah. I really like that. And Nicola's saying, out of comfort zone and thinking differently. Oh, yes, I can feel that. And in the chat window, our editor of online, John Kennard, has shared a link there. He says, learn from the best. Pixar's 22 rules of storytelling. Thank you for that, John. And what you can do, everybody, is you can just click on that link. It will open up in your browser. You can leave it there and come back to Adobe Connect, or you can have a read of it, whichever you want to do. Doug, let's come back to you for a moment, because you said Stephanie was saying something and it kind of sparked something for you. So tell us, if it hasn't completely lost,
something that Stephanie said,
what was that? What were you thinking?
By Natalie in the chat, and this observation of Natalie's, it's about allowing people to express themselves in ways they find most comfortable, allowing room for individual interpretation. And I think that's something that's really important. And I think when we were talking about storytelling, and you were referencing Nicola's points there, I think one of the things that if I'm telling a story in public, I find increasingly that I use fewer and fewer slides, and where I do, they're almost exclusively now visual images, and very often things that I might draw and paint to help me literally illustrate the story. And I think part of that's about me telling the story, but it's about me recognizing that there's room for adaptability and a need to ebb and flow, rather than having 20 slides with 5 bullet points on each one that I've kind of got to walk through. That to me, I think having less of that kind of thing again is a nod to vulnerability to some extent. But this idea about expressing expressing ideas in different ways, I think, is really powerful. And I think one of the ways that we can use, so if I'm thinking about visual art at the moment, if we want to facilitate a conversation about a particular subject, I think it's a great way of inviting people to make sense of that subject in ways that they are comfortable with. And if I may, I facilitated a discussion on community in the local area not so very long ago. I don't know how well these are going to come across, so but I've got a couple of images that I want to show you, and I'll briefly describe them. So I live near a place called Wallington, and this is a sort of coloured background and a hand here, and a hand cut. It's just a sort of swoosh,
or is that more like a concentric circle on the hand, on the palm?
And the note that goes with this picture, I'm not good at lining things up with webcams. There you go. It says, Wallington community. We use different fonts, colours and shapes to show the difference of people in our town, and the hand is to show friendship. So that was an artistic response to the question of, what does it mean to kind of be in this community? But that was as loose as the question was. And then I've got one more here. I've got loads of these, but this is another one. These are not, I'm not showing you these for their artistic prowess, but they are, if you ask the question and give people the tools and the space, this person said about that drawing, though we're different and seemingly divided, we share a common ground, and these spaces in between connect us. Now, I think those are two really interesting examples of how you can use homemade visual responses to a really interesting question to gain a deeper understanding. And in the case of those examples I just shared, we actually went on to display a whole range of responses to that question as a pop-up exhibition in the local area, so that anybody could come by and get a sense of what community means to us. And I think that, I'm biased because I took part in it, but I think that was a very powerful thing to do, and it comes back to Natalie's and Stephanie's idea that this is partly about allowing people to express themselves in ways they find comfortable.
Love that. Thank you, Doug. And in the chat window, Nicola has said Doug is brilliant at getting people to express what matters. Natalie loves the examples. Lee says perfect visual representation of a concept. Thank you. And speaking of communicating and getting comfortable, you might be new here. This might be your first time today. It's all about the conversation. Please use that chat window, even if it's just a couple of words to agree or kind of go, maybe not. Or ask a little question. Please do get involved. Of course, you're more than welcome to sit back, relax and enjoy as well, but we love you getting involved. Okay, so, Margaret, what have you got coming up here? This is looking interesting, but we'll come to Stephanie in a second, I promise. Margaret says, drawing the sea you swim in at work is a great way to express the environment you face in a non-confrontational way. Oh, I can only imagine the pictures that might come out of that and the materials you might use. That's amazing, Margaret. Thank you for that. A dog showing an interesting picture. I'm not going to say anything to that at all, nothing at all. So let's move on to Stephanie. Stephanie, we've got a really interesting question from Nikki Hobson. So Nikki, thank you for putting this in the question pod at the bottom of the screen. Nikki says, how do you use music which sparks emotions? So that's kind of part of the question. But the other part of the question is a really important
the music
one.
Work that I do, actually, we don't use pre-recorded songs. So I'm not using, somebody's song where we're using instruments, making up instruments and making our own music as kind of an improv or another way to create and display those emotions. But they're our own creations, so I don't have to worry about copyright at all. Sorry, I don't have a better answer.
Well, that's okay. So tell us a little bit more about how you do that, because that's one way of getting over that issue that Nikki's mentioning. And if you've got other ideas about the copyright element of using, music tracks, do let us know in the chat window.
Yes.
But Stephanie, tell us a bit more.
Yes, the idea is that people bring in something from home. It could be a pot and a pan, it could be a bowl, it could be a glass, it could be, whatever they would like to use to make music with. Could be a paper towel tube, it doesn't have to be fancy. We can even roll out, if they forget, we can roll up some paper and they can use that, in the workshop. And it's just then about creating something together as the group to, around a theme or around just a game, creating a pattern, sharing a pattern, and adding on. So one person plays one note or a couple of notes, and then the next person has to play those notes plus add, to it, and it goes around the circle that way. And again, it's just a lot of the stuff I do is really about getting people out of their comfort zones. This isn't going to be a recording that you're going to buy on iTunes anytime. It's music like art is something that makes people nervous. So the idea is just to show them that they can do this. This isn't, like I say, we're not painting the Mona Lisa here. We're not, recording to be on the Grammys. We're just having some fun and trying some things out. A lot of times it's something like,
you get from people. What do they?
Hey, wow, I didn't know I could do that. And maybe, the floor didn't open up and swallow me whole. So maybe this isn't that bad, and we talk about, how can we then apply that to our jobs, our everyday lives, what are you afraid of that, maybe you could try now that the floor earth's not going to open up and swallow you whole. what are you going to try? You know, try a new recipe, you know, in the kitchen? Are you going to try asking some more questions in the next meeting you go to? What are you going to try? So.
Love that. Thank you, Stephanie. I remember going to, where did I go to? It was the Impact International Festival of Learning 2 or 3 years ago, and they had a DJ there. Now, even though my other half is a party DJ, and I've used his equipment and had to play with it, and it's great fun, I'd never done the kind of, you know, headphones on, scratchy kind of, you know, DJing. And John Kennard, our editor of online, he is totally into that. That is his kind of world. But I'd never done that, and I was a bit like, well, the technology part of it doesn't scare me, but, you know, it's like, I'm 40 years old, and I'm not sure I listen to this kind of music, let alone can scratch it all together. But I gave it a go, and as you say, it sounded horrific, but I had a laugh, and actually I got into it, and I tried to apply some of the thoughts and the process and the creativity to it.
Yeah,
it still
absolutely.
sounded horrific. But it was great fun to explore. And then after that, it just felt like I feel joyous and I'm like, what's next? Bring it on. So, yeah, I love that. Brilliant. And Nicola says, I'll see you're 40 and raise that. Thank you, Nicola. But we both look stunning for our age, right? Let's say that. Doug, let's come to you on this point about music. So I know that you do some music. I know you do kind of some open mic nights, and I've seen pictures of you with guitar.
Well, I think I do. I mean, a couple of things that spring to mind. So, when I was a kid, I played in a lot of punk bands, played in the loosest sense. But I found I've always been quite nervous as a performer. I think a lot of us are. You know, it's hard to put yourself out in front of people, and it's okay to acknowledge that. So. I think one of the things that I noticed was that I retreated from musical performance a while ago, just sort of stage fright and nerves and what have you. And I also became conscious that I wanted to be more confident in front of people. And I found a local open mic evening, which had a good vibe about it. It felt like a reasonably encouraging, safe space. And so I took the decision I went and watched several weeks, and then I took the decision to have a go. And the same week I chose to start was the same week that I had a band over from America who were recording in the neighbouring studio and were very popular. The place was packed every time they were on, and then it got a bit less packed, but it was still very busy. Anyway, I played my 3 songs, and I felt like I really fluffed it. But I did okay, and no, not at all. But
like a rock star. That's what
I
I
was
wanted
shaking
you to say.
literally
That
shaking.
you felt like a rock star.
But it was all right. It could have gone worse. It could have gone better. But the point was, it was a nice vibe in the room, and so I decided to keep going back, and that became a place that I went to week after week after week. And I ended up, it's shut now, sadly, but I ended up going to something like 30 odd consecutive open mics, and kept going and kept learning and kept practicing. I kept trying new material out, some of my own, some of other people. So I didn't want to get settled, but I noticed that with anything, the more I went, the kind of better I got. I've just noticed in the back of my, you can see a guitar there, but don't worry, I promise you, it's staying in the background. So I've used it as a way of helping me gain some confidence about being in front of people by putting myself right in the sharp end. And as a freelancer, that's kind of useful, because if I'm in an organisation and I'm talking about doing things differently, I can talk to people about the terrifying nature of that kind of thing, of performing live in front of an audience. And I can tell them how frightening it is. And I think that means I can then say, you know, if I can work through that, then I think there's something you could do differently in a much safer environment that might be useful. I've closed several conferences with a song before now. So I either improvised in the moment, which is hard, or co-written with friends. So I've closed a number of HR and workplace conferences with a song. Sometimes it's about the event, sometimes it's about something more abstract. So I've used it as a way of conveying information in different ways. But I have yet to form a band in the moment like Stephanie has, so I'm quite jealous about that.
Okay, we need to get you two together to work on this, and I think maybe we need an L&D band at our next kind of event. Oh, is this kind of a shaker for the noise? What have I got somewhere? No, I can't see it now. I'll come back to that. I thought I had a little shaker that we could do a little kind of impromptu thing, but evidently not. And Philip is saying hats off to you, Doug, to finish with an impro song. Stephanie, let's pick up on this point about confidence. Doug is saying he did open mic nights and that he gained confidence from that. You know, I would never do anything like that, mostly because I had zero, and I literally mean zero talent at anything musical. But I've done karaoke.
It comes back to what I was saying a few minutes ago. You know, trying the stuff and not having, you know, the floor open up and the world open up and swallow us whole because we put some paint on a canvas or because we try to play, you know, a guitar or make some noise with a toilet paper tube, you know, in line with some other people in a group in a workshop, you know, and go, oh, that's not that bad. I can do that. I did, you know, no one came and, you know, grabbed me with a hook and removed me from the room and said, no, you're not allowed to be here. You know, I think it gives people the confidence then to go, oh, maybe the next meeting I'm in, I could try asking another question and see what happens. Or, you know, I mentioned cooking before. I'm not a good cook, but I, you know, I get courageous every once in a while and go, maybe I'm going to try a new recipe or I'm going to try combining different ingredients that I haven't used before and go, oh, that turned out all right. Oh, maybe that didn't turn out so well, but I think it would go better this way, you know? And it's just the confidence that, oh, it's not that bad. Nothing bad happened. We tell ourselves all these negative stories. Oh, they're going to hate me. They're going to, you know, I'm going to lose my job. Well, you know, probably not, honestly. And, you know, honestly, if you do, maybe that's not such a bad thing. Speaking from my own experience, you know, sometimes the thing we're most afraid of is a good thing, you know, but I think that's probably another topic for another day.
Quite. Thank you, Stephanie. And Doug, let's follow up with you on this point about confidence, and then I'd like to address humour. There's been a lot of chat in the chat panel about humour, so we'll come to that in a moment. But
something I
what are your thoughts
really
around
useful,
the confidence
I mentioned
element?
the Free Art Project, which is something that I started back in April of 2016, and basically I decided to start making and hiding art in the local area for people to find. And there were a number of reasons why I started it. I started it because I needed to let go. I needed to let go of some grief that I was carrying, but also so physically and mentally. And I also wanted to get into a way of kind of more regularly, doing something different on a more regular basis. Because I think one of the things that Stephanie and I have noticed is that people are very good at saying, yes, I'll try this today, but actually you need to do a bit more than just try it today. You need to try it tomorrow and maybe the next week and maybe the next week after. So I thought it would be interesting to engage in this kind of discipline myself. And what I began to realise was that actually it's become a really powerful tool of engaging with the community. I mean, in all kinds of different ways. And I won't go into the detail. I can point people subsequently to where you can find out more about it. But I think one of the things that I've learned, one of the many unintended consequences of this project, is that it reminded me, coming back to the beginning of this session again, this whole idea of being curious matters, and I think we probably all have that somewhere. And once we've acknowledged that, the important next step is to start something. I don't really care what it is. In my case, it was making and hiding art, but it really doesn't matter. And then the third thing that I found really useful in terms of gaining confidence is keep going. So to me, when people ask me about the essence of the project now, that's how I refer to it. Be curious, start something, keep going. And I think you'll benefit from all sorts of things, but confidence is definitely one of them.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Doug. And it's really interesting to share those experiences with you and have those stories that you're telling. Just before we move on, Nicholas says, Doug, would you agree that we're being trained to know,
yes,
and it's a big leap to become merely curious?
A real issue. People talk about how much we hate uncertainty, but actually it's all around us. And whilst I agree that above a certain level it probably does get increasingly hard to function usefully, I actually think that we are much better at improvising and much better at working with uncertainty and with the unknown than we give ourselves credit for. And I confess that I find some of the more sort of traditional learning and development and training offers rather narrow in their perspective, and that the idea that you're going to turn up and hear from somebody who's going to sort of talk you through a process from X, Y, Z, A, B, and C, and I accept there's a place for that kind of thing. But I think we do, we shortchange ourselves with that lack of willingness to engage with being comfortable with not knowing, with working with uncertainty. And actually, a lot of reasons why I find people want to work with me is because they want to find a way of crossing over that barrier and just getting on with it. And I think there's a lot you can do with the arts that can enable that sort of thing to happen in a very safe, non-threatening way.
Yeah, I just think that, you know, our curiosity, our creativity is educated out of us.
Thank you. And Stephanie, you were nodding in emphatic agreement there. Tell us more.
And I know from my personal experience, it was absolutely educated out of me, you know, between an undergrad in accounting and an MBA in IT, you know, creativity and curiosity gone. You know, and it was something that I had to relearn and reawaken. And I do think it's educated out of us, and because we're supposed to know we've got to get the right answer. We've got to do well on the test. We've got to do well on the essay. We've got to get the good marks to get into the good university and get a good job. And that's what it's all about, is having the right answer. But yeah, my clients want to work with me because I don't have the answer, but I'm not afraid to ask the questions and to challenge the assumptions, you know, and go, well, what if that's not true? You know, tell me, you know, all your assumptions. What are you assuming about the situation you're in that you can't get around? Well, what if that's not true? You know, it's an easy enough question to ask, but they don't think of it. So.
And I think it's an interesting area. I mean, Nicholas says in the chat that she was a lawyer in a previous life, so your experience definitely is really resonating with her. And I find it really interesting because even in, or maybe not accounting, but certainly in my experience of IT, is actually we have to be really creative, because it's not just, oh, well, it's unplugged, or let's plug it in again, or whatever. Sometimes it's not an easy response. And actually, we have to be really creative, even though it's within a technical industry. And so I find that really interesting that it gets trained out of us, even though it's a core component to problem solving and things like that. So that's kind of an interesting element. Natalie says, I like all the quotes today. In terms of confidence, the worst enemy to creativity is self-doubt, from Sylvia Plath. Thank you very much, Nicola. That's a great one. Let's move on. I think we've got one more main question that we're going to tackle today before we go into a bit of self-reflection and have a think. Stephanie, let me start with you before coming to Doug on this one. A question from Margaret Donald that was in the chat window earlier on. Margaret said, hi, what's a safe, and she put safe in front of air quotes, first step? I work in a male-dominated environment in a serious industry, and they are not afraid to push back to anything new. So what I'm hearing Margaret say is, I'd love to do improv music.
Myself, with my practice, my consulting practice, started with scribble drawings, and it's an idea that I still do in my workshops. although we go on and build on those ideas. But they're really simple, and I'll describe how to do them in a second. But I've had people take it for their own and start using it in their meetings and use it just as an icebreaker, and it really gets people to open up, and they're non-threatening. They're make people a little bit uncomfortable, I will admit. So, your people might still, push back a little bit, but they only take 5 minutes. You can go on with the rest of the meeting afterwards. So they're pretty low key and low threatening. And all it is everybody gets a piece of paper and a pencil. I like to use colored pencils, but if you just have your regular pen, regular pen in your hand, and start with a scribble. And close their eyes and scribble on the paper, and then hand it to the next person, and hand it around 5 or 6 times, and then hand it back to the person who it belongs to. And, and it's just an icebreaker. I encourage people to write down the first 5 words that they think of when they see, what they get back from everyone else. And it's just it re-energizes people. I use it sometimes at the end of a meeting because it re-energizes people. It shifts the energy. But at the beginning, it's an opener, it's an icebreaker, it's okay, now we're ready for serious work because we've done our scribble and we got our silly out of the way, and yeah, and the Germans that I work with love them, so they're very serious. So yeah, sorry, I shouldn't do that, but.
Thank you very much for getting into cultural stereotypes here. Thank you very much, Stephanie. And Margaret says in chat, okay, that sounds less daunting. Thank you. And Lise says, I teach lawyers. They are very anti anything new, but they become convinced when you talk to them about return on investment. It's all about what are you going to get out after you've put something into this. So thank you. And Doug, what are your thoughts about this, of those very first steps, especially if you've got an environment where you just know you're going to get pushback for whatever reason?
It's much better than anything I've said today so far. I'm loving it. Anyway, there are a couple of things. So I've taken the time to do some research on some of the benefits of using arts and creativity in a business context. And I don't have them to hand or off pat, but I submitted a research paper to a conference last year which got accepted. So there is some sort of intellectual rigor, if you like, behind this. Is not just about kind of goofing off and making a mess and what have you. Although I think those things are very worthy pursuits. So there is evidence out there that shows that this stuff can make a difference. I prefer to think a bit about not being the answer, but an answer, a possibility. One of the things that I'm grateful to a friend for in terms of getting started, that whole idea about where you start, and this, I'm so glad you asked this question because it's taken me back to a drawing that I made in 2015, and it's this one. And I don't know how well you can see that because, as I say, I'm very bad at. So, and I put the little logo of someone throwing the rubbish in the bin at the top. I'm sorry, I'm really poor at webcam drawing holding up. I need to work on that. But anyway, this is the whole idea of this is you just make, but make with the intention of screwing it up and destroying it. So you're not gonna show it to anybody. I mean, you can if you want. That's entirely up to you. But this is a really nice way to loosen people up. It gets them actually putting a pencil on paper, so it actually gets them doing something they may not have done for years, but it's also just a way of loosening up. And I'd say, for me, it's a great entry point because they're making something that they know isn't going to be subject to any scrutiny. They're going to get rid of it at the end. And actually the act, I very often hold the bin and let them chuck it at me, if you like. And that's a really interesting way of, so there's a bit of humour involved in that. I'm the target. But there's also a way of that discharges a little bit of energy and actually, move. It actually gets something to move, literally move around. I've got a number of a couple of other ones of these, but that's where it all started for me. That whole overcome fear, start small, draw for the bin. So Margaret and anyone else who's struggling or wondering where to go, something like that's a really useful exercise, as is the one that Stephanie mentioned.
Really like that. Thank you. And in the chat, people are saying great idea, can be applied to anything creative, and thank you. And John says too many people, myself included, feel like they don't want to start because it won't be perfect. And I think that's a great point. I was on a few sessions that Christina Gadd put together last year, maybe the year before, and it was all about drawing on your tablet or your iPad, you know, to snap up your PowerPoint slides or something. And like many, I kind of think, I don't think I can draw. But when it was broken down into just do a square, then just do circles, then just do this, all of a sudden it was like, oh, I can draw something. You're like, I'm not Van Gogh. Nobody's going to be buying my art, but I can draw something. And that's pretty cool. So I think that's a great point there, John. Thank you. Okay. And where did I want to go? I was going to go somewhere. So Lise was saying about ROI, and Stephanie said all
sure.
of this.
Yeah, all of this stuff improved. You know, the creativity, these games, all this work that opens up questioning and makes all that okay. Makes people improve their engagement in the organization and their jobs and what they're doing. You know, which is, I think, as training professionals, learning professionals, I think that's what we're trying to help our organizations do, is improve employee engagement. And anything that we can do to improve that employee engagement results in things like less sick time, less time people away from their desk, but also better solutions, better communications with their colleagues and the people that they're working with, better collaboration. All of these things come out of people feeling like they have a say and really engaging and finding why they're there that day.
That's great, thank you. And I think when, as Lise says, as Stephanie says, when we can wrap this into the organisational needs and the people needs, that's when it becomes less about this throwing away frilly artsy-fartsy rubbish, and actually becomes so much more important and explorative. So thank you very much for that, Stephanie and Doug. Now, we're not finished yet by any means, but we are going to come off webcam because I want to move into a reflection piece now and think, we've had a great conversation so far. What are we actually going to do with that? So Stephanie and Doug, we're coming off of webcam. Let's go to our whiteboard now and we'll have a quick practice first of all, and then we will make sure to actually put some stuff on here. Now, what we've got available to you, and I'd love you to practice with, please, is we have a text tool that you can use. If you click that text tool, click on the screen, type your name and click away again, it should highlight your name and share that with everyone. Or if you want to get a bit more fun and funky, seeing as this is all about the artistic stuff, you could use your pen tool if you wanted to and come up with something that's a bit more drawing based if you preferred. That's me drawing a little heart there. I'm not quite sure how good my drawing is with a mouse, but if you wanted to do a little something and be brave because we're being creative, you are more than welcome to. Also, you might have noticed that the very first tool in the toolbox, that's how we can pick things up and move them around if we want to. So we're having a little practice with those tools. If they're not working for you, we can just use the chat window. That's no problem at all. Let's move into a nice fresh whiteboard. Oh, look at this. Flowers and stars and sunshines. Loving this. Let's move into our question. What is your action point from today's discussion? We've got some great stuff, some great links that have been shared to listen to watch, to read. We've had some great discussions and great questions. What are you going to do after this? Is it that you're going to go and pick up your paintbrush or your pencils? Is it that you are going to do some more reading about this? Tell us what it is. And I love that somebody is writing on the whiteboard, play. Love that. So you can also use your text if you prefer. You've got your text tool there. We've got Stephanie and Doug. They're still here. Don't worry, they're not going anywhere. Somebody has said check out Sketchnote, and I think John just shared, yes, we did an interview recently with Rachel Burnham, who does sketchnoting. Revisit using music in my sessions. Doug, let's get you unmuted, because that was something that you were talking about from your own point of view of playing. What's your reaction to somebody saying they're going to revisit using that in their sessions?
Is to remind people and to encourage people that it's okay to do something different. And I think rather than perhaps look to some of the things, so, you know, I mean, I've been fiddling with the guitar for years, but actually Stephanie made a really good point earlier on that you can make a noise, a perfectly acceptable set of rhythms and what have you, out of much less expensive and more readily available equipment. So I think, you know, my gut reaction would be just try it, see if you can find it as a way, start at, maybe use that as a way of, you know, just encouraging people to loosen up. I think, again, it's important to be contextual. So to Margaret's point, if you're working with a group of people who see themselves as very serious, then maybe that's something that you might want to end on rather than begin on. But I think for me, this is all about encouraging people that it's okay to play, that actually this sort of stuff is an important part of doing things differently. And in fact, it is doing things differently. And do you know what? If we're not willing to kind of back ourselves on something like drawing for the bin or just making a weird tune out of toilet roll tubes or whatever, then what chance is there that we're going to be willing to do something different when it comes to, you know, developing a new learning strategy for our organisation?
Love that, Doug. Thank you. And somebody who's drawn on the left of the screen, they've drawn their bin for us. I love that. People are typing, try new things. To sing, I will not sing for you now. You would not appreciate that. Use drawing, reflect, and there's that gorgeous sunrise or sunset there. Do you know what? I can see all the colours there, the oranges, the pinks, the blues on the water, just from that one line drawing. Other people are saying implement things, share with my colleagues, use a freeing
being
exercise,
free, on creating a safe space.
Once the mood is safe. Now, Stephanie, that was something that kind of you were talking a little bit about, of using that freeing exercise. And for me, this whole exercise is freeing as well. What are your thoughts?
Stays in Las Vegas, or however that line goes. That doesn't ring quite right, but what happens in my workshop stays in my workshop. They're free to do whatever they want to try to do. I'm not going to judge anything. I want to encourage, and I do encourage people to try it. I've done workshops and had people come up to me and say, well, what happens if I do this with the paint? I'll say, well, I don't know. Why don't you try it and find out? And I've had people, someone else come to me and say, well, I got brown paint in my yellow paint and no, it's ruined. And I'm like, no, it's not. There's brown paint in your yellow paint. What are you going to do about it? How are you going to adopt your picture and change what you're painting to incorporate the brown paint in your yellow paint? Life, that's how life goes. So you've got brown paint in your yellow paint. You didn't want it there. What are you going to do about it? I can't take it away. It's there. So let's adopt and figure out something new to do now that you've got brown and the yellow.
That's a really great point. And actually, a lot of what I do is teach people some technical skills as part of my work outside of TJ. And it's the same basic concept of, what does this button do? Well, why don't we press it and find out together? Or this didn't work as I thought it was going to. Well, that's okay. Let's flex with it. Let's do something different. And Doug has shared a link with us in chat saying an artistic response to the need for psychological safety. So that'll be an interesting reading. Thank you, Doug. And other things on the whiteboard. What have we got? Dance. Oh, that's a good one. I like dance. The bottom right, sketch. Enjoy being creative. Draw for the bin. Try something different. Create for the bin. And next time I have a creative block, draw or write for the bin and be unafraid to explore. I think that's an interesting point. I write a column for Training Journal every month. And some months I sit there looking at this blank Word document, kind of going, come on, inspiration, you're in there somewhere. And where I come back to is write about what I know and just start writing, if nothing else. I'm starting to do some creative writing. And it was literally, I had an idea for a scene, I wrote it, and then I got to the end of the page and went, well, that's it. That's the whole idea. But you know what? It was just fun writing that. And probably one person will read that and no one else. But I enjoyed it. And I think it's giving ourselves permission to do some of those things. So thank you very much for that. Some really great things there. Neil says, thanks team, some interesting thoughts. Absolutely. I think it's probably time for us to kind of start wrapping up now. I'd love to know kind of your thoughts that you're taking away or anything you want to share in the chat window. Stephanie and Doug, thank you so much for your time today, your thoughts, your sharing, your links, your inspiration, for everything that you've done. We've got in the chat window, I've just pasted hyperlinks to websites and to Twitter if you want to kind of go and get involved. I know Stephanie and Doug would love to chat with you a bit more about that.
Yeah,
Doug, what's your final quick
Doug,
thought?
I'm afraid just start, just try something that you're curious about and keep going. You know, if you don't like it, like I tried mountain.
Love it. Thank you. And Stephanie,
what are
your final quick
I thought
thoughts?
that was really cool. I hated it. I did it. You know, I tried it out and I'm like, nope, not doing that again. So, but you've answered the question. Oh, I thought that would be really cool, but it's not. I'm not going to do it again. Go on to the next thing. Yeah.
Love that. And actually, it depends on the rock climbing you were doing, because I did a lot of indoor stuff and loved it. I did some outdoor stuff and hated it. So that's another conversation. Thank you very much, Stephanie. So pop onto Twitter, go and jump on there. Tell us what you thought of today. What did you get out of today? What's your inspiration? You can go and follow at Training Journal. I'm Lightbulb Joe. I've also shared in there the Twitter handles for Doug and also for Stephanie. We have all of our webinars are available online. You can go and have a look back through all of our previous webinars, and you can also sign up for our next webinar as well, all about a really important topic, diversity and inclusion. Is it L&D's job to go and focus on those things, or actually is it someone else's job? How can we do that, and what can we work with within the company culture? And remember, if anything has kind of really highlighted to you something you want to share, something you want to talk about, if Twitter isn't your thing, that's absolutely fine. You've got LinkedIn as well. We've got a LinkedIn group you can go and have a look at there as well. So thank you very much for your time today. Thank you especially to